True Crime Brewery contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Medical information is opinion based on facts of a crime and should not be interpreted as medical advice or treatment. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to True Crime Brewery. I'm Jill.
And I'm Dick.
Normally, when we talk about parents who have a missing child, we're talking about distressed, loving parents who'll do anything to find their child. But in the case of missing children, Tylee Ryan and J.J. Vallow, we're delving into new and really unimaginable territory. The lives of J.J. and Tylee's mother, Lori Vallow, and their stepfather, Tammy Daybell, have been suffused by drama and multiple deaths. As more is discovered about the couple's deranged religious doctrine and ongoing deceit, they're exposed as more evil than righteous. Today's episode is part 1 in our 2-part series, Doomsday Parents. As Tammy Daybell and Lori Vallow face multiple charges in court, the loved ones of the many lives lost in their wake are left to grieve and try to find a way to move forward. This may very well be the most complicated case we've ever researched. So please join us at the quiet end as we delve into this real-life horror story.
So I'm going to do a beer from Hawaii for today's episode, just because we're going to be in Hawaii with the episode, and I think we end the episode in Hawaii. Anyway, it's a Hawaiian beer. It's called Big Wave Golden Ale by Kona Brewing Company. So this is an American blonde ale. Not very good, but it will quench your thirst. It's a clear gold color, has like a 1-inch white head. The aroma and taste are fairly subtle. A little bit of malt, some sweet malt, grassy hops. That's about it. Light-bodied, not much flavor, but a thirst quencher.
So kind of like Lori herself, a not good blonde.
Yeah, she's definitely a not good blonde.
Yes. All right, well, let's open it up and give it a try.
Okay.
All right, Dickie, come on over to my quiet end and let's start this horrendous story with so many twists and turns. I hope I can get everything straight. And, of course, that's why we're doing 2 parts, part 1 and part 2, because there's just so much here to tackle. It's a lot to unpack for us.
This sure is. I mean, just when you think you might have a little bit of a handle on some aspect of it, it gets turned around.
You're right.
And something different happens or something strange happens. So this is a fascinating case. It's still evolving, so there might be a part 3 at some point.
Yeah, I would think so, because there's still a lot to hammer out here.
Boy, isn't there? Okay, let's start. So first up, Lori Vallow, who is a 46-year-old mother of 3, married a 51-year-old father of 5, Tammy Daybell, on November 5th, 2019, in Kauai, Hawaii. Chad's wife for close to 30 years, Tammy Daybell, had been found dead in her home just 2 weeks earlier. So obviously they didn't waste much time in remarrying.
No. Stunningly quick.
Tammy was an apparently healthy 49-year-old woman. In fact, she was training for a marathon. Just 10 days before her death, which was October 9th, 2019, Tammy reported on Facebook and the police that a masked man had shot at her with what she thought could be a paint gun. What's going on there?
Right, exactly.
The other very interesting aspect is that Lori and Chad had picked out and ordered their wedding bands more than 2 weeks before Tammy's death. So
that's right.
Chew on that one for a while.
Right. So October 4th to 5th, Tammy visited her parents back in Springville, Utah, where she's from. And then a few days later, on October 9th, a man in a ski mask was shooting at her. So I guess the police decided it was just some kind of prank because she thought it was a paint gun. And they never found the guy. But it's very curious.
Well, it is.
And it's really just the tip of the iceberg in this really strange case with all these suspicious occurrences. Just everything surrounding Lori and Chad is a mess. And very suspicious, of course.
Yes, that's an understatement.
So Tammy Daybell is Lori's 5th husband. Lori was born Lori Noreen Cox on June 26th of 1973 in San Bernardino, California. And she grew up with 2 brothers, Alex and Adam, and 2 sisters, Stacy and Summer. Alex Cox plays a really large role in this whole story, so you need to remember him. Adam lives in Kansas, and he's worked as a radio personality, but he's pretty much out of the whole scene as far as we know so far. Stacy Cox died in her parents' home when she was just 22 years old, and this was from complications of type 1 diabetes. Lori's remaining living sister, Summer Cox Shiflett, was one of Lori's biggest defenders until June of this year, and that's when the remains of her children, J.J. and Tylee, were discovered on the property of Chad Daybell.
People who knew Lori well have said that she really became a different person after she became involved with Chad. She had been considered an excellent mother and a good friend to many. Many years ago, back in high school, Lori was a happy, energetic cheerleader. At 19 years of age, she married her high school sweetheart, Nelson Yanes. This marriage was over within a year. Then when she was 22, in 1995, Lori married 23-year-old William Lagiola, and this marriage was in Travis County, Texas. They had a son named Colby in 1996, and they ended up divorcing in 1998.
So by the time she was 25 years old, she'd been married and divorced twice already.
See? And she has 1 child. And then in 2001, Lori married Joseph Ryan. Joe converted to Mormonism, and that was the religion that Lori had been raised in. He didn't legally adopt Colby, but Colby took his last name. And he and Lori had a daughter together, that's Tylee, in 2002. In 2004, in August, Joe filed for divorce from Lori, and it was finalized in 2005. In 2006, Joe Ryan filed a complaint with the court stating that Lori was not complying with the visitation order. He asked that she be held in contempt. Then, August of 2007, Joe is attacked by Lori's brother Alex. So this guy chases Joe around with a stun gun, he tased him twice, and he threatened to kill him.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask probably a stupid question. Is this because of the divorce or because he took her back to court?
I'm thinking it was related to the custody issue because the divorce was already finalized.
Yeah, it had been finalized for over a year.
But, she was also looking at some trouble because she was in contempt of court. She wasn't bringing Tylee for her visits, and she was keeping Tylee away from him.
Yeah.
So Alex, Lori's brother, was very protective of her and actually seemed obsessed at the time with killing Joe Ryan. The incident happened when Joe was leaving a supervised visit with his daughter, Tylee, and the attack ended when an eyewitness showed up. So Alex pled guilty to aggravated assault, resulting in serious bodily injury, and ended up serving 90 days in jail, and this was in Austin, Texas. But the custody battle between Joe and Lori over Tylee really got very dark. At one point, Lori had to install cameras in the children's rooms and in the living room for the court to see what was going on in her house. But no abuse apparently was found from that camera footage. But just so you know, this was a really nasty custody situation.
Yes, and then we have Joe dying in April of 2018, still a young man. This was determined to be a heart attack. They did an autopsy, but then his remains were cremated. This whole time, his custody battle with Lori over Tylee had continued to be ongoing.
Right. I believe he was 59, but he was pretty healthy. And there were some strange things about his autopsy as well.
Really?
Yeah. Now, the court documents say that Joe Ryan accused Lori of parental alienation, alleging that he had not seen his daughter for more than a year at one point. And he also referred to a court-appointed psychologist who had interviewed Lori. And according to court paperwork, the psychologist, David R. Poole, said, "Mrs. Vallow is a devout Mormon who's mentioned to me that death would be an option before giving Tylee to her father, Joseph Ryan, even for a visit."
Wow.
So the psychologist, of course, said that these are very real, serious concerns.
I would imagine. Jeez.
So the suspicious things about Joe's death is that he was actually found in his apartment after a neighbor noticed a terrible odor. Actually, it was his dog who went over to Joe's door and was scratching at the door, and then the neighbor went over and smelled this horrible odor of decomposition. So it turns out that Joe's body had been in his apartment for about a week. So strangely, I guess, Lori was still listed as Joe's next of kin. So police tried to reach her on the phone many, many times to notify her of Joe's death, but she never answered their calls or called them back, so that was very odd.
It sure is.
And when she did learn of Joe's death, she didn't bother to even notify Joe's sister, who at one time had really been her best friend and a really good aunt to Tylee. According to one friend of Lori's from that time, Lori told her that she just didn't care that Joe was dead and that actually the world was a better place without Joe Ryan in it.
Wow.
But we need to note, too, that Tylee was the beneficiary for Joe's life insurance, and she would also get Social Security survivor benefits. And of course, Lori was the one in charge of Tylee, so she would have access to that money.
We do know that Joe and his siblings were raised in foster care, and his sister admits that Joe could be physically abusive with Colby, Lori's firstborn. In an interview on Dateline, Colby says that Joe would go out of his way to make a point and spank him or hit him. And almost in what looks like an afterthought, Colby added that Joe had sexually abused him as well. Colby also said that his mother had not told him where J.J. and Tylee were.
She wouldn't, right?
Right.
She wouldn't tell anyone. And another remarkable thing that he said in that interview is that his mother got jealous of his girlfriends at one point, and he felt like she was treating him more like a boyfriend than a son. So that tells us something about Lori as well.
It does.
I mean, it seems like she's really obsessed with getting male attention, for one thing. Of course, that's just one little thing in a long list of her issues.
There's a few issues here.
Quite a few, yeah. So in 2006, Lori had married her fourth husband, Charles Vallow, in Las Vegas. Charles was 10 or 15 years older than Lori. He was divorced with 2 older children, and J.J. was the biological child of Charles's nephew. So Charles's sister, who's J.J.'s grandmother, Kay Vallow Woodcock, was caring for J.J. with her husband Larry when they decided that Lori and Charles could adopt him and probably give him a better life because they're a little bit younger, they have other kids, at least one still at home. So that's what they decided to do, and Charles was really excited about it, and actually at the time Lori seemed to want to do this. So the adoption went through in 2013, and JJ was just like 1 or 2 years old at that point. Later it was learned that JJ was on the autism spectrum, and he did have some significant special needs. But in the beginning, Lori did seem to be able to deal with him really well. So when Lori and Charles moved to Arizona, Joe Ryan had to take a job in Scottsdale so he could be near his daughter Tylee. So Joe wasn't perfect, but you can see that he did want to be a father to Tylee.
Yeah, it looks like he was making an attempt.
Yeah.
Boy, this is already complicated, isn't it?
It's very complicated.
So we've got Lori and her fourth husband, and Tylee and JJ, and then third husband Joe, right? Is he the third husband?
Yeah, Joe was the third husband.
So he's moved nearby so he could be near Tylee.
Yes.
Wow. And they didn't stay in Arizona this long. 2014, Lori and Charles moved again, this time to Hawaii. And they moved with Tylee and JJ. Now, around this time, maybe a little later, Lori became familiar with the books of Chad Daybell. Chad was a Mormon novelist, and he had written more than 20 apocalyptic and Latter-day Saint novels.
Sure. So I guess she was just really taken with him pretty early on, really liked his ideas. Chad was born in Provo, Utah in August of 1968, and his parents were Sheila and Jack Daybell. Chad wrote that his middle name, Guy, came from his maternal grandfather, who told him a story once about meeting a messenger from heaven at a temple one day. So this story seemed to have made an impression on Chad, and maybe even started his belief that people on Earth could communicate with the dead. Chad grew up in Springvale, Utah, and this is where he met, dated, and raised his children with his first wife, Tammy. He and Tammy both graduated from Springvale High School, and Tammy's family moved there from Southern California when she was just 13.
Early in their marriage, Tammy was the breadwinner. She worked as a secretary for the Springville, Utah Parks Department, and Chad went to college. He graduated from BYU in 1992 with a bachelor's degree in journalism. So they initially both worked for the city of Springville. Tammy worked for Springville as a building secretary and receptionist from 1988 to 1992, and then again in 1996 to some unknown date because the city couldn't locate her final date of employment. Chad worked from 1985 to 87 as a Parks Department worker and supervisor. In 1989, he was a cemetery worker, and in 1996, he was hired as a full-time cemetery supervisor. He resigned from this job in 1999, and then he was hired again in August 2008. So he's kind of roamed around a little bit.
Yeah, and he was kind of an expert at burying bodies, if you will, which is significant, or at least interesting.
Yeah, I don't know about significant, although there's some stuff we'll be talking about.
Sure. So in 2001, Chad said his experience at cemeteries, combined with his previous experience working at a daily newspaper, prompted him to record his tales of the bizarre and unexplained for a book. And that book is entitled 1 Foot in the Grave. So that's probably the first book that he published. And most of his books he published himself. But he resigned for good from the city in October of 2014, and that's when the Daybell family moved to Idaho 1 year later, 2015. Tammy and Chad had 5 kids together: Garth, Emma, Seth, Leah, and Mark. And Chad alternated between working as a writer and a publisher and caring for cemetery grounds as a sexton.
Yeah, so Tammy and Chad started a publishing company together called the Spring Creek Book Company. One of the first authors they published was a woman named Suzanne Freeman, and she met Chad after a friend connected them to write about her near-death experience. And together they published 3 books, at least according to Chad's website. So Suzanne Freeman said she was very impressed and actually moved by Chad's love for Tammy, whom he often described as his soulmate. Chad also published books by Julie Rowe, who met Chad through LDS of Vallow, an online end-of-times preparedness forum. This was in February 2014.
Yeah, so Rose said she decided to write about the dreams and visions she had after her near-death experience in 2004, during which she actually spent 2.5 days in a coma. So Chad was into this whole dreams and visions and afterlife stuff for quite a while.
Yeah, not something brand new.
No. But gradually, Rose said, she and Chad both became busy with separate projects and they kind of fell out of touch. Rose started a podcast and launched a nonprofit focused on helping people after natural disasters, and this was called the Greater Tomorrow Relief Fund. Rose said when she spoke to Chad, he told her he was busy speaking at conferences that were organized by Preparing a People. And this is a media company with a mission to help prepare the people of this earth for the second coming of Jesus Christ. So Roe, who does believe in the existence of past lives, said Chad also told her about an out-of-body experience that he had at his Rexburg home. He told her that his spirit came out of his body, his kids and his wife were there to witness it, and he was completely outside of his body in his house for a few minutes. So after that, he seemed to really become obsessed with past lives and the end times.
Lori and her 4th husband, Charles, moved back to Arizona from Hawaii in 2017. According to people who knew her well at the time, Lori had become fascinated with the ideas of multiple lives and the end of the world. Some of his books that Chad wrote on his website are based on his own children and his first wife, Tammy Daybell. And as we said, he and Tammy founded Spring Creek Books.
They did, but now that website's been taken down, so that's probably a good thing. In his 2017 autobiography, Living on the Edge of Heaven, Chad said that he's had multiple near-death experiences and lives and lives with 1 foot in the spirit world. In his perspective, this meant that he knew things about the future and he had a portal to the afterlife. So he could also travel by this spiritual portal. Didn't have to take a plane or drive necessarily. He could kind of beam himself like the Star Trek characters.
Yeah, you're starting to get weird on me, Jill.
It's getting a little bit out there, and a lot of people felt that way, but a lot of people really liked listening to Chad and were going along with this. The Times of Turmoil book series tells a story about the United States at the edge of collapse. Natural disasters will lead to economic difficulties, leaving the United States on the edge of collapse. During this time of strife, members of the LDS Church will be invited by their leaders to survive the civil unrest by gathering to holy refuges. So that was the summary of the book. He's kind of going out towards the edge of the LDS and then over the edge, because this is not what they believe.
No, not in the least. In his autobiography, Chad writes, "I don't fictionalize any of the events portrayed. I'm really not that creative. My torn veil allows information to be downloaded into my brain from the other side. The scenes I am shown are real events that will happen." Boy.
Yeah, so he claims to have this unusual connection to the spirit world. It's kind of making himself special, which is like something a cult leader would do.
Right.
So that's the way he seems to be going. When he was 17, he'd had this near-death experience he would talk about while he was cliff jumping. And he claims that he crossed into another dimension, and that's when he realized there was a world beyond this one. And that's where his focus really turned.
Okay. He also wrote about a second near-death experience that he'd had in his early 20s. In this one, he was hit by a wave at La Jolla Cove in California. And while his body was being tossed by the wave, his spirit was visiting with his grandfather, who showed him future events involving his not-yet-born children. This accident, Chad claims, caused his veil that separates mortal life from the spirit world to remain partially open. So this gave him a foot in both worlds.
Yes, what do you think of that?
Total bullshit.
Yeah, but do you think he believed it? That's the thing. Did he really believe this stuff? Or was he just doing this for attention and I don't know what else?
I think he believed it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So if that's the case, at this point, he's probably thinking, shit, I really fucked up things.
Could be.
Yes, because things aren't going the way he predicted at all.
No.
So it was late October of 2018 when Lori Vallow attended a religious conference in St. George, Utah, with her friend from church, pretty much her best friend at that point, Melanie Gibb. Melanie knew a speaker and author who was there, and that was Chad Daybell. She'd seen him speak before. She wanted to meet him because she thought his ideas were interesting. So he talked about his visions of the second coming and said he could see the past and the future in his visions. Chad had been married to his wife Tammy for 28 years by this time, and they had 5 grown kids. Melanie could see, though, that Lori was really fascinated by Chad, and Chad and Lori spoke for hours. And Chad told Lori at that first meeting that she and he had been married 7 times in past lives. So according to Chad, he'd lived 31 past lives, and Lori had led 21 lives. Of course, only 5 of those lives were lived on Earth. The others were on other planets. So Lori was really just wrapped up in this, loved it, and remained in contact with Chad afterwards.
See, and I guess everyone's kind of a believer, right? Because nobody's pointing out to Lori that Chad's nuts.
Well, I mean, it depends what you mean by everyone. I think Melanie was kind of believing a lot of it. She would say she believed most of it, but not all of it.
Well, we've seen her in the interviews. I mean, she was into it.
Yes, not so much as Lori.
No.
No, but yes, a lot of people were kind of getting into it. I'm not sure how much they believed, but Lori was totally wound up in it.
And then after the conference, Melanie started to notice that Lori was often upset with Charles, her husband, but she could never figure out exactly what was upsetting Lori. Charles was a pretty laid-back guy, and he seemed always to want to make Lori happy.
He definitely did. I mean, he was giving her everything she wanted, and he was very worried about her when these ideas started coming to the surface. Then one weekend, while Charles was away on business, Lori decided that she would hold a spiritual conference at her house. And Chad drove 13 hours from his home in Rexburg, Idaho, to be there for it. So he stayed at the Vallow house and spoke to the several participants about the mysteries of God. He seemed to convince Lori that she was a very powerful, kind of chosen woman. And according to Melanie, who was there, Chad and Lori spent a lot of time together that weekend, alone, talking, taking morning walks together, and having these private conversations.
They're interested in each other, aren't they?
Oh yeah, there was definitely an attraction right away, and that's where I get a little bit, I start wondering a little bit about Did they really believe this, or was this convenient for them to be together, right? I definitely think that by him saying they were married before, that was a way to get her to be with him. He was attracted to her. She was attractive. Much as I hate her, she was fairly attractive as far as people go. Probably more so than he would be considered.
Oh, definitely.
Yes. So I really feel like the attraction was a lot of this. It wasn't all the spiritual beliefs and everything they were trying to make it to be.
Yeah, but of course you have to go with the spiritual part, right?
Exactly.
Melanie had a podcast, and Lori made some guest appearances on it. And then Chad became a guest on the show. And it was obvious to Melanie that Lori and Chad were falling in love. Chad claimed that he and Lori were exalted. They were special, and they were going to recruit the 144,000 people who would be saved when the end of the world came. So Melanie asked Lori, well, why don't you get a divorce? But Lori said she and Chad could not divorce their spouses because they were the chosen ones to lead this select group of people to usher in the end of times and the second coming of Jesus Christ.
Okay, but Lori's been divorced several times by now.
Yes, but maybe since she met Chad, those are forgiven. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and Chad certainly wouldn't get a divorce because it wouldn't be that easy. He was sealed in the temple with his wife, Tammy. So getting a divorce in that kind of situation is not great. Plus, if you're this great divine leader, I'm sure divorce isn't the best thing on your record. So this is, again, one of these cases where people choose murder over divorce, is what we're thinking.
Right.
We don't have evidence of that yet completely, but it certainly looks that way.
Well, there's enough suspicion.
Oh yeah, there's so much circumstantial evidence for certain.
Some of the recruits they got included Lori's brother, Alex, Melanie, and then a niece of Lori's named Melanie also. Two Melanies.
Yeah, Melanie Gibb and Melanie Pawlowski.
And there's an energy healer named Zulema.
Right, those are just some of the people that are going to be in this story who were part of the group.
Yeah.
Of course, there were a lot more people because they're trying to get to 144,000.
Well, it must be tough because you have to find the right 144,000.
Well,
right?
yeah, not just everybody's going to go for this.
Well, of course not. And not everybody's going to be wanted to be in that group. I mean, Chad and Lori are the leaders. They have to be wise in picking out the 144,000.
Exactly, yes.
So they're the leaders of this, I don't want to say cult, whatever it is. And they said that invasions and earthquakes would bring an end to the world. The 144,000 chosen ones would meet in Rexburg, Idaho, and the upcoming apocalypse was kept secret from the rest of the world.
Yeah, so they had dates for when this was going to happen, and I think the last date mentioned was July 22nd of this year, so of course that's passed and the world hasn't ended. And I guess it wasn't going to end all at once because there was talk about how they would all meet in Rexburg and they would be camping, but of course Lori and Chad, they're kind of better than everyone else, so they wouldn't be in tents.
Well, of course not.
So Lori really was believing that she was chosen. And she and Chad went to the Mormon temple and sealed themselves to one another, which is totally not allowed. You can't just go do that, and they're both still married to other people.
Right.
So really bad. If you're an LDS, this is not cool.
This is bad stuff.
Yes. So also Chad said that he made a portal in Lori's closet so that she could visit him spiritually. They also made charts of who the people were who were part of the 144,000 and who was sealed to who and how many probations, which is another word for lives, they've had, and who they have been in their past lives. So, of course, Chad had been some really remarkable, famous people, including Martin Luther.
Well, I think it has to be. If you've got to have all these past lives, there's got to be at least one who's famous.
Well, of course. And apparently there were celebrities, movie stars on this list. The chart was on Chad's computer and in his email. The 12 apostles are on the list, as well as some celebrities. Tammy's on the list, and she was put down as being married to John the Beloved.
Who's that?
Somebody in the Bible.
Okay.
I'm ignorant to that stuff. But when Charles found this list in Lori's email, he shared it with other people as proof that his wife had lost her mind and was in a cult. And Charles was genuinely worried about Lori.
Well, I would try to look at this from his perspective. His wife has totally gone bonkers.
Yes, really.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
And he loves her. He wants to help her.
They'd actually been married for quite a while.
Yeah.
And in January of 2019, he actually had tried to get her help. But, this also brings up another issue, is mental health in this country. You try and get help for someone. I understand they have to be careful about a spouse having another spouse locked up. But she really didn't get the help that she could have gotten. And if this is all just coming from a mental illness, this could have all been prevented if she'd gotten help at this point.
Well, yeah, assuming she could have gotten the help and assuming that she was into it.
Into getting help?
Into getting help, wanted to be helped.
She probably wouldn't be, and that's another obstacle.
Right. Because
Yes.
it doesn't sound like she had anything other than Chad's way.
Well, yes. And, when you talk about these strange beliefs and, maybe even brainwashing, it still seems to me that there's something sinister there that's not just about this religious belief.
Right.
They're really getting rid of people who are in their way.
That's what they're doing.
And isn't it just interesting that the people who need to die are the people that are getting in the way of these two being together or getting money that they want?
Mm-hmm. Jill, what did you put in the blender?
My Bluetooth earbuds. If I hear another piece of shit commercial, I'm going to scream.
That's a little extreme, don't you think? I can't help you with other podcasts, but all of our True Crime Brewery episodes now come with commercial-free versions for our Tie Grabber subscribers.
Well, I know. My hate for ads is what motivated me to give Tie Grabber members that ad-free option. If you subscribe at tiegrabber.com, you get to listen to all of our new episodes commercial-free, and this is in addition to our bonus episodes every month. Plus, you get some great TCB swag mailed to you when you join.
Okay, I get it. At least TCB listeners can avoid ads. Just turn off the damn blender. You're going to wake up the whole neighborhood.
Okay, I'm sorry for swearing.
Not a fucking problem.
So at this point, Chad and Lori are speaking daily on the phone, and he was teaching a doctrine that was not part of the Mormon religion at all. Many who had Chad speak at their conferences really had no idea how far away from Christianity Chad had wandered. But still, there were many people fascinated by his claims that he could see the future, that he saw visions, that he could transport. I mean, some people just easily buy into this stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be those types.
Yeah, but probably not buy into it as heavily as Lori did.
No. Now then, after some time, Chad called Lori, and he told her that her husband, Charles, is now a person named Ned Snyder, who's an evil spirit, and he was no longer in his body, so that made him a zombie. So Lori told Charles that he was a zombie, and she threatened to kill him. Charles, for his part, was concerned that she had had some kind of mental breakdown.
Well, yeah, you think?
And he sent her to a psychiatrist for an evaluation. According to Lori, she had no mental illness.
Well, okay, so she said she had the evaluation and she had no mental illness.
She did.
But these kinds of records are sealed, they're private, we can't access them. And she went to speak to the psychiatrist alone, so she comes out, she tells her friend Melanie, oh yeah, they said I'm fine. But she could have convinced them she was fine, or she could be lying about what they said. Unless they can prove pretty much that she's a threat to herself or other people, it doesn't mean she has no mental illness. It just means they can't involuntarily lock her up for help.
Right.
Right.
And she could have said, if she was with the psychiatrist, no, I never meant to kill him. I never threatened to kill him.
Well, of course.
What are you talking about? I love my husband.
And according to Melanie, she could be quite convincing. Lori could.
Sure.
But of course, things were really falling apart in Lori and Charles' relationship. So by early 2019, they're pretty much estranged. And in February of 2019, Lori told Charles that she no longer cared about him or their son, J.J. She told Charles that she was the reincarnated wife of Joseph Smith. So Joseph Smith is the founder of the LDS?
Yeah.
Lori had also taken $35,000 from their joint bank account, and she had stolen his truck from the airport when he was away on business. So he got home, his truck wasn't there. And now she was claiming to be a god, assigned to carry out the work of the $144,000 at Christ's second coming, which would be in July 2020, according to her and Chad. Now, the thing is, though, Lori didn't want a divorce.
Well, no, she couldn't.
But she said to Melanie that she believed Charles was going to die. So Charles was pretty freaked out by this. He took J.J. and he moved back to Texas.
Yeah, and then Lori went to Kauai with Tylee. There they visited an old friend of Lori's named April Raymond. April noticed that Lori had changed. She's talking about light and dark spirits, and she said that Oprah Winfrey was the darkest spirit of all. She had several phones with her, and she was texting and taking calls on all of them. She asked April to be one of the 144,000, but April declined.
Well, yeah, I think April was a little more solid, and she thought this was pretty crazy, and she thought Lori seemed kind of manic. But the East Idaho News, who's covered this story in really intense detail, has estimated that Chad and Lori had 60 cell phones between them.
So Lori and Tylee left Kauai and went back to Texas to reconcile with Charles and J.J. When she went to Texas, Lori said that the Lord had told her to get Charles's finances in order. She was worried that Charles might change the beneficiary on his life insurance to his sister, who is J.J.'s grandmother, and that's Kay. Chad had now told Lori that Kay was a zombie. So anybody that's doing anything that Chad and Lori don't like, I guess they're zombies.
They're turning into zombies, which means basically that their body's been taken over by an evil spirit. It's not the kind of zombie that you and I know of.
No.
No, it's not The Walking Dead. But seems pretty bad to call someone a zombie.
Well, it's not a...
It's an ominous thing.
It's not a good name to call them, is it?
Well, no, and it seems like once you're a zombie, you need to die, is basically how this is working out.
Yeah, when you're a zombie, you're not a person.
That's right. So murdering you is just fine.
Sure.
So Charles was unaware of Lori's motives, and he was happy that Lori came back to him. In March 2019, he withdrew the divorce petition and said he wanted to try and make the marriage work. But then I guess Lori felt pretty confident that the life insurance was still in her name, so she left Charles again. This time she took Tylee and J.J. with her back to suburban Phoenix. And then it would be 3 weeks later when Charles came to visit.
Yeah, and then Lori had said she received a revelation that Charles was going to die in an accident on his way to Phoenix. Charles didn't, frustrating Lori. So she called her brother Alex and said, "Come and spend the night." The next morning, Charles would be dead.
Right, so we don't know what she said to Alex when she asked him to come spend the night with her, but it certainly seems like something was up. And it seems like Alex was really believing a lot of these things that Chad and Lori were preaching. According to people who knew him, Alex had been a fun guy. He actually did some stand-up comedy. But he was very loyal to his sister, and he became a true believer in what Chad and Lori were telling him. So Lori stopped going to the Mormon church because she's really not believing what they're preaching anymore.
No, she's got her own religion now.
And she had at least 3 phones at this point that she was using, probably more. But she did have one special phone that was only used to communicate with Chad. And same thing with Chad. He had a phone that he just used to communicate with Lori. So they were becoming more and more secretive, and their beliefs were becoming more inconsistent with the Mormon religion, which is a religion they both had spent their entire lives in, so it's kind of shocking.
They pretty easily turned their backs on it.
Yes, to follow this craziness.
On July 11th, 2019, Charles was shot in the chest and killed by his brother-in-law Alex. Alex called 911 to report that he had shot Charles in self-defense. And when the police arrived, Alex was led outside, and he was sitting on the curb telling the story to police. And as police are interviewing Alex, Lori and Tylee arrived at the house. And Lori, with her husband dead inside the house, she just seemed super casual, making jokes and smiling. Didn't seem to faze her at all.
No, not at all. I mean, she was acting like, I don't know, something minor had happened, right? Like a car had been stolen or something.
Yeah.
Or maybe even something more minor. So really creepy how that happened. And her explanation was that she and Charles were arguing over his cell phone, and Tylee went and brought out a bat, and Charles had gotten the bat and hit Alex in the head with it, and then Alex had gotten his gun and shot Charles. So they spoke to Alex, And he said he had his gun with him, and he went to get it from the room he'd been sleeping in because he'd spent the night there. Remember, he didn't live there. And he said he'd shot Charles in self-defense. Alex and Tylee's story, though, of what had happened didn't match. And then after it happened, Lori said that she left the house to take J.J. to school and then returned. So, just super strange. And you can see the police footage of this. And it's just crazy the way they're behaving. Also, I think it's pretty crazy how the police just let Alex come out of the house and sit on the curb. He's just shot someone. They didn't handcuff him. They didn't arrest him. Nothing.
They disarmed him.
Well, big deal.
I know.
I mean, he's just killed someone. Whether it's self-defense or not, something like that should be determined later. But he should certainly be arrested at that point if he's just shot and killed someone. Of course, I'm not a policeman. I don't know how that works, but it seems strange to me that he was allowed to just sit there.
Yeah, and the other thing that seemed strange was that Alex said that it was self-defense because he had been hit, struck in the head. And he had this almost non-existent scratch.
Yeah, a little cut on his head that he kept dabbing at with a paper towel.
Yeah, and not really getting much blood.
No, and Charles was a pretty big, strong guy.
So there's some incongruity there.
Absolutely. And what about Lori leaving the house to take the kid to school? I could see maybe wanting J.J. to not be there, but take him outside, find a neighbor, something. It's just very strange.
It's beyond strange.
It just seems so disrespectful to Charles' life, and it seems like something really is up there that's not good.
Now, her friend Melanie didn't learn about Charles's death until 4 days later. Lori called to tell her. Melanie knew that Lori and Chad had prophesied Charles's death, and this is when she finally started questioning Lori and Chad's motives. She knew about the life insurance money that Lori believed she would collect, and no one could ever recall Charles being violent.
No, never.
So Alex and Lori were detained by police, and they were released later that day when the shooting was determined to be self-defense.
Yeah, but her whole behavior after this happened is terrible. Following the shooting, neighbors reported a pool party that evening with loud music, and the landlord who'd rented the house to Charles and Lori said that Lori didn't seem upset at all after seeing her husband shot dead. Alex continued to stay at the house, too, for several days, even though he had his own apartment nearby in the same area. So this landlord, who knew Charles and Lori quite well, asked her to move out, and she left on August 31st, 2019. But then Lori notified Charles' adult sons about their father's death over text message. And this is just outrageous to me. The messages, which were obtained by East Idaho News, so we were able to read them, start with Lori informing her then-husband Charles' grown children that their father had passed away the day before. So, of course, we know that Charles had not simply passed away.
No, he didn't. He was shot.
By Lori's brother.
Who said it was a case of self-defense.
But Lori refused to tell her stepsons that or provide them with any information. So, in the text she wrote, "Hi boys, I have some very sad news. Your dad passed away yesterday." Can you believe that?
No.
"I'm working on making arrangements and I'll keep you informed with what's going on. I'm still not sure how to handle things. Just want you to know I love you and so did your dad." So that's something that would be kind of cold-hearted if you were telling someone about their dog.
Yes.
But to tell someone about their father that way is just horrific. And Charles's ex-wife, his first wife, who's the mother of his sons, was just so offended by this. This was so painful for her sons to deal with.
Yeah, and they tried to get more information, but got nothing back from Lori. One of the messages was from the sons, "Lori, it's been 3 hours. You're not that busy. I don't care what you're doing." And she finally did reply to that. She said, "I'm so sorry you are so upset. I'm so upset too. I'm waiting to hear back from the medical examiner to make sense out of all this for myself. Please be patient with me. It's a crushing situation all around."
So this just indicates guilt to me that she doesn't want to talk to them.
It would seem.
If you want to avoid talking to them about it, you feel some guilt. You
Yep.
know you've done something wrong. And it's not clear why she would have needed to hear from the medical examiner to make sense of Charles' death. Police have said she was there when Alex shot Charles, in front of 17-year-old Tylee and 7-year-old J.J. Lori's 2 kids, who went missing. So these devastated and really exasperated sons pressed for more information from Lori, but she was not helpful at all. 3 days later, they texted her, "Okay, Lori, it's been 3 days. You let us know our father passed away over a text message. We need any information you have. What happened? When did it happen? And how did it happen? Where is he now? Are there any funeral plans? And can we be a part of it?" This isn't a nonchalant topic you can just throw a text at and be done with it. Of course. I mean, they're so absolutely right.
Her response was, "These are your dad's wishes. He and I discussed this a lot over the years we've been together. My plan is to have him cremated, as he wished, and then take all 5 of you kids to Hawaii to spread his ashes. He did not want a funeral. He wanted a celebration of his life."
So even if that part was true, why wouldn't you call these young men? She's avoiding them.
Well, of course.
Well, one of the sons told the East Idaho News that he and his brother figured out which mortuary had their father's body, and they just showed up there. They didn't know what else to do. But unfortunately, the funeral director was just not helpful either, because he'd already spoken to Lori, who I guess told him not to say anything.
Apparently.
They said when they approached him, he was very shaky and nervous. And when one of Charles's sons asked him for information, the director said something like, "I can't tell you that. It was requested that I tell you nothing." So the sons were able to arrange a memorial service themselves for their dad, and Lori didn't attend. So holy shit.
Lori got pretty upset when she found out that the life insurance policy had been changed. The beneficiary is now his sister Kay. Charles apparently wanted Kay to have the money in order to care for J.J., who, as we said, had special needs and might never be able to live on his own. We had Lori expecting to get that money for her use.
Yeah, her use probably to start a new life with Chad.
Yep.
So Chad and Lori had also told Melanie Gibb that Chad's wife Tammy was going to die soon. So according to Chad, Tammy wouldn't mind this because she would understand that Chad and Lori belong together in the afterlife because they've been married so many times and so many different planets and so forth, right? So This makes it, understandable. Tammy will die, but, she's going to move on in the afterlife and she'll say, "Oh, yeah, I had to die so that, these 2 exalted ones could be together."
Well, yeah.
No problem.
Hadn't they been together 21 times in past lives or something like that?
Well, yeah. And, why does Tammy's life matter? Or the mother of the 5 children, Tammy. Do they really need her? I guess not.
Oh, apparently not.
She's in the way, in other words. That's all it is. But sure, they really could put together some bullshit about it.
Oh, yeah.
To try and justify it, at least in their own minds. Because I don't think many people outside of them would believe this was kosher.
I don't think so.
No.
So Lori's making plans to move to Rexburg to be with Chad, and at the same time pretty much waiting for Tammy to die.
Yeah.
Tammy didn't die by the end of that summer, but Lori moved to Rexburg anyway. She and J.J. and Tylee moved to a townhouse in Rexburg. And then while in Rexburg, she spent a lot of time with Chad.
She did. So Alex got a townhouse in the same complex. Also, Lori's niece, Melanie, would move there. But we'll get to that probably in part 2 because there's just so much to get through here. But Lori and Chad are in Rexburg. They're out together in public, holding hands and kissing, out walking the track at Brigham Young University, Idaho, with really no concerns about Tammy or what she knows.
Right. And no concerns about people that might see them and they're not a couple.
Well, exactly. And Tammy's not stupid. And I really believe that Tammy did know something was up. But at the same time, Kay and Larry Woodcock, J.J.'s grandparents, were really having a hard time reaching J.J. on the phone. They like to FaceTime with him. They were still very close to him. But when they did speak with him, he seemed to be taking instructions from his mother and just getting quickly off the phone. And then came a time when they weren't able to reach him at all. Then Tylee's big brother Colby was unable to reach her or JJ either. And it seems like the 3 kids were pretty close. So Colby's an adult. He's pretty concerned. And his mother's not being honest with him either.
No. Tylee had last been seen on September 8th, 2019 at Yellowstone Park She was there with J.J., Lori, and Uncle Alex, and this was just a few days before her 17th birthday. And when Lori's friends Melanie and David visited them on September 22nd, Lori told them that J.J. had become a zombie. She said that J.J. had raged and climbed on top of the cabinets. She couldn't control him, so she had her brother Alex come, pick him up, and take him away.
Yes. So these friends, Melanie and David, it was another one of those conferences where they got together at Lori's house, like a religious conference. But they wanted to spend some time with J.J., and they didn't see anything different about J.J., of course, to say that he would be a zombie. Of course not. He's the same kid. And also it seemed to them that Lori was lying. J.J. was, 7, fairly big-sized 7-year-old. He's not going to be climbing up on top of the cabinets, and there was no damage to the cabinets or anything that would show that. I'm not going to argue that he wasn't a lot of work. I'm sure he was a lot of work. But to call him a zombie and have her brother take him away, how can you be that cold-hearted? He is her son. She's raised him for several years at least. It's not like she just took him in a week earlier. There should be some kind of a mother-son bond there, but apparently no. Melanie would say that Lori and Tylee really weren't having the best relationship at that point either. No. And of course, Lori said that Tylee had become a zombie as soon as she became a difficult teenager. So that had been going on for a while, according to Chad and Lori.
On October 9th, 2019, Tammy wrote on her Facebook page that she was shot at in her driveway by a masked man. She thought he had a paintball gun. She also reported this to the police. And the assailant was never found.
And then Tammy Daybell died in her bed in the home she shared with Chad on October 19th, 2019. So this is just 10 days after the shooting attempt in her driveway. And this is after Lori has moved to Rexburg. And just remember, Lori didn't know anyone else in Rexburg. She didn't get a job there. Her only reason to be in Rexburg was to be near Chad. So Chad told the EMTs that Tammy had gone to bed with a terrible cough and just didn't wake up the next morning. And it's shocking to me that there was no post-mortem exam or autopsy done. And this was because Chad declined.
Yeah, it sounds strange.
It really does, but I guess it's basically up to the family, at least in that county.
I don't think it's just the family's decision. There must be some laws.
The county coroner could have overruled it, but he didn't. But she's 49.
She's a young woman.
Yes.
In good health, who woke up dead.
Yes.
You need an autopsy.
Absolutely. But there wasn't one done.
No, but she was not cremated.
No.
She was buried.
So that's one good thing, I suppose. But her death was treated as if it was from natural causes. And Chad did collect over $400,000. I think it was $430,000 in life insurance. Then, buckle your seatbelt, Dick. Just 2 weeks after Tammy's death, Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow got married to one another.
Well, they were meant to be.
They're very recently widowed.
Yep.
Now, another shocking thing, which really points suspicions at this couple, is that Lori and Chad purchased their wedding bands before Tammy died.
Yep.
And the purchase was made under Charles Vallow's Amazon account with his credit card. That's 17 days before Tammy's death. How do you explain that to people?
I have no idea.
I don't either. Unless you're saying, yeah, I had a vision she was going to die, but who's going to believe that and not be suspicious and concerned?
The only thing you can say is that the angel or whoever appeared before me and told me that in 10 days my wife would be dead. So if I wanted to make preparations for my next marriage, I could start doing that.
Yeah.
When you talk about it that way, you see how nuts it is.
Well, and I'm really heartbroken for the 5 children, Tammy's children. Haven't heard much from them, which is understandable. But can you imagine how they feel? It just has to be so heartbreaking for them. So let's save the wedding and the search for J.J. and Tylee for part 2 next week. But before we end today, I really would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about Melanie Pawlowski, and she's formerly Melanie Boudreau. That's Lori's niece. And we don't know how much this Melanie knew, but she was very likely, I would say definitely, a believer. And she at least knew about Lori's dangerous beliefs, which put her children at risk. and did nothing to stop it. So in October of 2019, Melanie was going through a divorce with her husband and the father of her 4 children, Brandon Boudreaux. And according to Brandon, his wife Melanie began spending a lot of time with her aunt, Lori Vallow. And he said she joined what he called a doomsday cult. She demanded a divorce from Brandon all of a sudden, he said. On October 2nd, Brandon was returning home from the gym when a 2018 Jeep Wrangler pulled up with a rifle with a silencer protruding out of one of the windows. And at first he believed this was a paint gun, but a bullet came whizzing at him and barely missed his head, actually. It turned out this car belonged to the deceased Charles Vallow, the late husband of Lori Vallow. But it's believed that the shooter was Alex Cox, Lori's brother, the one who shot and killed Charles. So Brandon explained that he was so fearful of this situation that he went into hiding in Utah with his 4 children. 1 month later, in mid-November, a 911 call from American Fork Police showed that Melanie tried to visit her ex-husband's father's home. So according to police reports, Melanie's uncle, Alex Cox, drove her to Brandon's father's house. And Brandon's father yelled at Melanie to leave and told the 911 operator that she had gained access to his garage. He claimed that Melanie was banging on his door and yelling, and he told the dispatcher that she was there trying to find her kids. He also said, "Somebody tried to kill my son 3 weeks ago, and we believe that she's involved in it." So police did arrest and cite Melanie with criminal trespassing. Melanie had left her ex-husband Brandon and their children in Arizona shortly after Brandon accused her of being part of a cult. And she moved to Rexburg, Idaho, and this is when she married Ian Pawlowski, just weeks later. And according to East Idaho News, Melanie was pregnant with Ian's child at this point. And there's some interesting things with Ian. Ian wrote in a statement that Melanie told him she was worried that Lori Vallow's brother Alex Cox may have tried to take care of the kids. She explained that Alex Cox had great faith and never wavered in his trust in the Lord, so no task would be too difficult or too great for him. So that's scary stuff.
This is just Looney Tunes.
It really is.
Well, Melanie had been told by Chad and Lori that their children had been possessed and had become zombies. One document from the custody case discusses zombies, described as human bodies that have had their original spirits forced from them and have been possessed by either a demon, a disembodied spirit, or a worm-slug creature controlled by Lucifer that enters the body to control the host.
Right? Very reasonable stuff.
You just can't make this stuff up, can you?
Well, I guess you can. Chad can.
Oh, gosh. Ian has said that his ex-wife Natalie had contacted him and expressed concerns about the children's exposure to Melanie and the Vallow family.
Well, I guess so. I'd be pretty damn concerned.
No kidding. She went to the police, and Ian agreed to go with her to the Rexburg police headquarters. Ian was met there by FBI agents who asked for his cooperation, and he agreed. For 2 weeks, Ian wore a wire and recorded his conversations with his wife, Melanie. Didn't expose any information about the missing kids.
Not on the recorded conversations, but I just really wonder what he did talk to her about and what he knows.
Yeah, I mean, he did admit that the missing children wasn't ever a topic of the conversations that had been recorded.
Which is strange.
It is. So, and after a couple of weeks, Ian told Melanie that he had been recording her. Melanie told him that she believed the authorities were taking advantage of the fact that they were newlyweds who didn't have a long history together. She said that she felt her husband was trying to do the right thing, but he was just confused about how to go about doing that right thing. We don't know really what prompted Ian to tell his wife that he'd been spying on her, or what that meant for any agreement that he might have had with the local or federal law enforcement.
Well, I mean, it seems to me he chose his wife and didn't really continue helping the FBI, correct?
Right.
His ex-wife had found notes on his computer documenting the time he had been working as an informant. The ex-wife is the person who sent the files containing his notes to Melanie's ex-husband, Brandon Boudreaux, and then he released them to the media. But the really important part of this is that Ian wrote in his notes that Melanie told him Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell believed that the children, Tylee and J.J., had both become possessed by zombies. And Melanie had worried that this meant that they believed the children needed to die. So Melanie definitely knows more than she's letting on.
Right. And the notes taken from Ian's computer actually do conflict with his claim that the children's disappearances were not discussed in his conversations with Melanie.
Exactly.
So you can see that.
Yes. Now, in the most recent interview I could see with Melanie and Ian, it was before the children's remains were found, and he was still defending Lori, and she was as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really just disturbing.
And it's just going to get weirder.
Yes, and it's still ongoing. So the thing about J.J., when Kay tried to call and find him, was that the service dog had actually been returned, and that what Lori had said is that J.J. was with Kay, and then when it was found out that he wasn't, she said that J.J. was with Melanie Gibb. And then Chad and Lori tried to get Melanie to lie to police about having J.J., and that's all a bunch of stuff we're going to get into next week, because we're going to talk more about the disappearance, about the time in Hawaii, and about what was found on Chad's property, and also their arrests.
Well, it's exciting.
It's exciting and upsetting.
Yes.
Yes. And just a lot to go over, that's for sure. So let's wrap up for today, and I'll give out our sources. Our sources are the East Idaho News, a couple of Dateline NBC episodes, Madison County, Idaho court documents, and we also have used scribe.com to get access to marriage, divorce, arrest, and search warrant documents. TCB's music is produced and recorded by Tristan Capel, and if you enjoy listening to our shows, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes or wherever it is that you listen to us. If you visit our website, tiegrabber.com, you'll find a shopping page where you can buy some nice brewery merch. We have teas, tanks, and we also have warm, soft hoodies for you as the cooler weather moves in this autumn. So now we also have cloth masks as well, which I've bought a few, and they're very comfortable. That way you can keep you and your family safe and also declare your love for TCB. You can also subscribe to our members-only show, True Crime Brewery Premium, on our website, and as a member, you'll have a new bonus episode each and every month, ad-free versions of our weekly show, access to over 40 bonus episodes, and of course, we'll send you a gift with a handwritten thank you note. And once you're a member, you don't have to listen to this self-promotion stuff anymore, so that's a nice thing.
See?
So I think that's enough of that. We do have a little feedback today, so let's get into that.
I got a little bit of feedback for you. I got a voicemail and a couple emails. Voicemail is from our friend Amy. She's left other ones. I think we've even done a case on one of her recommendations. Anyway, Amy's got the voicemail.
Hey, Dick and Jill. This is Amy from Alaska. Hope you guys are doing well. I have a case suggestion for you. Maybe you've already covered this, but it's about Harold Shipman, who was a doctor, and he was a British doctor, and the only doctor in history to be found guilty of actually murdering. He is said to have developed a fondness and even an addiction for opiates after observing how much relief they had provided for his dying mother when he was young. Operating from 1975 to 1998, he would inject patients with a lethal dose of heroin and then falsify their medical records to report that they had been at death's door anyways. Nice. He would also steal their jewelry and forge their wills. That would be an interesting case to hear you guys cover. On a side note, I'm also a member of the TCB fan group on Facebook. I recently posted some edited photos of you guys that I used to practice my Adobe Illustrator skills on. Hope you really enjoyed those. I know that I did, and so did a lot of other fans. Also, everyone really enjoyed the behind-the-scenes making of a TCB episode on YouTube. And I think I speak for the group when I say we would love a part 2 of Behind the Scenes. The chemistry between you two is adorable, and it's always great to put a face to the voice. Love you guys. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Amy. I loved the photoshopped pictures, Amy. I thought they were great. I love the one with Keith Morrison, of course. Love that one. Actually, I think I'm going to make that one my screensaver. So thanks for that. And something I've thought about is doing a couple more episodes on video, maybe even just for members. Something I would like to do eventually.
Well, we can do that. Or, as Amy said, an updated behind the scenes, or I don't know, whatever.
Yeah. So that's something to think about. I've thought about maybe a Facebook live stream, Ask Us Anything, something like that. I'm just incredibly shy, so I'll have to work my way up to something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And the case suggestion is a good one. We've heard about that case and have thought about doing shipment. This just gives us a little more impetus to actually do it. So thank you.
What a guy.
Yeah, nice guy.
Just really terrible. But anything with a doctor who kills people is usually something I find fascinating. Or a nurse. It's just always fascinating when someone has that medical knowledge and they're supposed to be helping people.
I know.
It's just too much.
Flies in the face of everything.
Absolutely it does, yes. So we have a couple of email case suggestions, I believe.
We do. One's from Jan. Jan says, I'm new to True Crime Brewery, but love the pod. I especially appreciate the genuine thoughts and occasional colorful language. She's talking about you, Jill.
What the fuck?
Yeah, I've got a suggestion for you. It happened in Gillette, Wyoming, December 5th, 1998. My family was living in Gillette at the time. When deputies found Cheryl Trover, a Campbell County High School math teacher, bound in a culvert near her burning pickup, they initially thought a kidnapper had grabbed her and killed her husband. She was bound and left near the pickup, and her husband was killed. There was a community manhunt, but they never found the murderer. And then things started to mess up for Sherry. There was an affair with the high school principal. Her kids recognized their mother's voice underneath the ski mask. How's that for an ID? Couldn't see the face, but it sounded just like Mom.
Yeah, I think you'd recognize your mom pretty easily.
Right. And there's an eventual suicide. Now, I will leave that right there. Hopefully you'll find the story interesting. I've got a beer suggestion, too. It's from a local brewery in Bismarck, North Dakota, called Laughing Sun Brewing. It's called Sinister. It's a Belgian-style ale, 9% alcohol by volume. And she says it will knock your fucking socks off, Jill.
All right.
But I love it, and you only need one. Cheers.
That's good, because you save money that way if you only need one. Yep.
But yeah, this is a fascinating tale.
It sounds really interesting. I can't wait to find out more about that one. So we also have one more case suggestion from Sue. The episode of Gabe Watson was almost exactly like David Swain, Rhode Island dive shop owner, accused of killing his wife during a scuba diving trip in 1999. Can you do an episode on David? Well, I think we would like to, wouldn't we, Dick?
Yeah, we have done an episode on the scuba diving accident, but this is another good one.
Yes, his wife Shelley died while scuba diving in the British Virgin Islands in 1999, and it was initially ruled an accident, but then Swain was charged with her murder after he lost the civil suit in 2006. So he was convicted in 2009, but then, for some reason we'll have to look into, that verdict was overturned in 2011.
Right, and it doesn't look like there's any retrial. There hasn't been.
Yeah, it's been 9 years. Yeah. Okay, great case suggestions.
That looked pretty good. The civil suit was brought about by Shelley's family. He lost that, and then he actually declared bankruptcy. So it looked interesting, so I think we'll check into that.
Yeah, well, those civil suits are rarely done for the money.
No. As this one was. It pushed the police into charging him.
Absolutely, yes. Yep. So thanks, Sue. That's a great case suggestion as well.
Yeah, we'll look.
All right, so we will be back next week at the Quiet End to talk some more about the Doomsday Parents. So might want to have a drink ready before it starts.
We might have to.
Yes.
All right, guys.
Okay, we'll see you next time at the Quiet End.
We'll save a seat.
Bye-bye.
Bye.